I wanted to have the first section of our questioning key off of something you said in this last talk on masculinity. You said that the largest demographic group in your church is single males in their 20s, and you used a phrase that was quite striking to me. You said you've gone after that group.
Intentionally focus.
How? How have you gone after that group?
There's a whole bunch of variables. The number one issue they find statistically of why a man chooses a church is who the senior leader is. Guy walks in and is like, I'll follow that guy. For women, it might be, I have friends there, I like the programming, I like the band, and they got something for the kids. For men, it's pretty simple, like, I'll follow that guy or I won't.
Right.
It's pretty quick. And so we like to have strong men lead, especially from the front. It means as well, like the talk I just did, the guys hear this kind of stuff a lot. It's woven in. And a lot of the teaching is real practical on God as Father and what does it mean to be His sons and how do we treat His daughters. There's also just a culture where young men are encouraged and compelled and disciplined to move fast and to grow up. And then we don't have like a young adults ministry or singles ministry. We have a church and they come in and you're a man, here's Christ, here's some stuff to get to work on by the grace of God, and we put them to work. So we don't reach out to young men, we reach out as well from young men.
Okay.
And so there's young guys with major responsibility at Mars Hill, which is unusual. But I think what can happen otherwise is if I'm not opposed to study, but if a guy's only studying for too long, he becomes an idealist and he starts criticizing the work of other men because he's not busy doing his own work, and we call that Bible college. And so like I've got one guy, he's in his 20s, he planted our church for us next to the University of Washington last year. We bought him a multi-million-dollar building. He had 800 on opening Sunday. He's in his 20s. That's a lot of responsibility for a young man, but he's shouldering that load. And that's, Ecclesiastes, it's good for a man to bear the burden while he's young. As much as anything, it's giving the young guys a vision, releasing them with mentoring and oversight of the elders to do ministry, and then they get very aggressive. And so that's why we're now 30-some services on a Sunday. Spreading across 4 states and 13 locations is where we're nearly at, and that's just young guys, really aggressive.
How do you balance that? Let me, mention 2 things. When you were talking, I read a book 30. I couldn't read 40 years ago. Well, maybe I could. I read a book decades ago on a MiG pilot who defected to the United States. And at some point in the book, he was given a tour of an American aircraft carrier. And he was absolutely flummoxed at the level of responsibility that 19 and 20-year-old sailors had. And he said in the Soviet Navy, it was just top down. You had to get clearance from Moscow in this hierarchical system. And he said it was an amazing amount of responsibility. And so there's an obvious upside to giving responsibility. How do you balance that against Paul's warning to be, don't lay hands on hastily and not a novice, lest he fall into the temptation of the devil? How do you keep your young bucks, whose glory is their strength, from having it go to their head? Yeah,
the Bible doesn't have anything good to say about young men. I don't know if you noticed that. Like, they're strong. Yeah, so's a terrorist. But for us, it's a formal system of membership, and then we have a school and kind of all of that. We also have a formal coaching system where there's an older pastor who's in authority over them in a mentoring relationship that's structured. And so we don't just unleash these guys. You got to keep the dog on the chain. Otherwise, you're going to go bite the neighbor kid. But with young guys, it's getting them a good mentor and a godly older man, because most of our guys, they come in, they're not Christians, they become Christians, they didn't have a Christian father or any father, and then all of a sudden they're really fired up and they want to take responsibility. But unless there's a godly man there who's in more of a father role,
a mentorship sort of
thing.
thing.
Like, I'm going to coach you, direct you, I'm going to help you here. And what we find is that young men, they don't want to be controlled, but they're glad to be influenced.
Okay.
And there's a difference there. He loves me, he's for me, he's going to help me glorify God, so he's for me. As opposed to no. And part of that comes out of my story. I planted too early. I should have waited longer. I got saved at 19, married at 21, planted at 25, no Bible college or seminary, and I'd never been a member of a church. I was like, I'll start one. Like, it's insane. It's like, hey, I've never been in a plane, but I think I'll fly one. Everybody get on. It'll be fine,
And the scary thing is that it worked,
Well,
right?
With one wing, and we landed it in a tree and all got out safely. But so I should have waited longer. But I like to give, because I think what can happen is too, if you hold a young man back too long, you can really take some of the fire out of him, or they get fired up about something else.
Or they'll go somewhere where someone will put them to work.
Yeah, and that's where most churches have tons of young men or no young men. Because the young men know, like, if I go there, they're going to help me figure out how to do what it is God has, really burdened me to do. So all the young men go there. You don't look across a city and say, well, there's an equitable distribution of young men across all the churches. Like, no, they're all here, and they're not here. Well, it's because here they get an opportunity to be trained to do something.
One of the things I've noticed, I've talked with other ministers, I've been in discussions about this problem at our presbytery meetings, where churches, many evangelical churches, many Reformed churches, have a surplus of young women.
Yeah.
2 to 1, 3 to 1, 10 to 1, in terms of girls who are available, sweet, godly Christians, want to start a family, and there just are not.
Yeah.
The guys are simply not there.
Yeah.
And the pastors are talking about this, it's an enormous pastoral problem.
Oh, yeah.
And they're tearing their hair out, they don't like it, what do we do? And this is a question with some landmines in it, so I would like to ask you.
I expected that.
All right.
So I'll be fine.
But at least I told you.
Yeah.
Posted. Is there anything you would say to the pastors of churches in this situation who don't like it at all? Is there anything you would say to them about what they might need to do to repent? So if they're exasperated with young men not coming or not asking the girls to marry them and not, is there anything that we do in Reformed evangelical churches that just weirds the guys out, chases them away, in a way that's our culpability, not theirs?
Yeah, I mean, in greater evangelicalism, sometimes the programming is built for the women and the children, which means a good Christian father drops them off, like that's his responsibility, and then drives away. And so they program the man out of the church, as opposed to primarily, how do we train men to love their wives and love their children, to do Ephesians 6:4, raise their kids, to do 1 Corinthians 14, answer their wives' questions. So sometimes the programming can be, wow, these women really need this, and the church thinks, how can we do that, rather than, where's that guy? And how do we help, train, compel him to love his wife and love his kids? And it's not that it's a sin for there to be ministries at a church for women or children, but if that is to cover his negligence, let's not do that. Let's expend our energies to go find him and extend the right hand of fellowship.
So would you say that a number of our programs might be spiritual welfare programs?
Counterproductive.
Paying the guys to not do what they're called to do.
And I think sometimes in the Reformed world, what can repel some of the guys is when Reformed theology tends towards scholasticism and the primacy of the mind, and for the guys who are regular working Joes, they're just lost. They're like, I don't know. Like those are big words, and I don't know. And so, we need to teach in such a way that the average guy, Spurgeon talked about speaking the plowman's English, that the average guy walking in goes, okay, I know what we're doing, I know what we're talking about, this makes sense to me. But sometimes because Reformed theology has really been committed to theology and study, which is not a bad thing, sometimes the leaders fail to translate well for the average person. Because guys don't like to feel stupid.
Right.
And so the pastor gets up and he's like, oh, and kephale means, and the guy's like, kephale, I think I went to kindergarten with her, I don't know who that is. He's just lost, Right. And everybody says, boy, the pastor's really smart, but then what he just made is all the other men feel really dumb.
Right, and sometimes what the pastor is doing in that situation is he's acting like the bull elk. He doesn't want any other males coming into the herd that he can't beat up.
Yep.
Right?
So he becomes the bully.
So he becomes the bully, and so it may not be happening accidentally, because any young man is a challenge. Or, how dare you? When you have young men, well, let me ask you, this talk that you gave us tonight, would this be the kind of regular teaching that you would be?
It's woven in, the guys hear this, the guys know this, and then it creates a culture, because if I say it, they could say it to each other, and so they'll confront one another and be honest with one another and exhort one another, and because the single guys, the guys in the church know who the guys are that are really blown at the worst.
Okay.
And so they'll go track them down and hunt them down. And, and we encourage that. And what I find is that men like a challenge, and just nobody's ever challenged them. And you give them a challenge and they tend to arise to it. You're the image and glory of God. Could you put the joystick down and do something else? Hey, that's a good idea,
Right.
And so to build, part of it is building a culture. And a lot of times the church answers the question with, how do we create a program? It's not bad to have a program, but if you don't have a culture, a program it's not going to function well.
One of the things you've mentioned to us is that your churches at the center of Seattle are sort of the evangelistic, get people saved, attract them, and then you get them married and they move out to the suburbs to some of the campuses there. This might seem an odd question. Most churches have a surplus of marriageable young ladies. You have a surplus of marriageable young
it's pretty
men.
even, but at any given point.
Well, that was my question, is when you tell them to get married, where do they find the girls?
Yeah, they find them at Mars Hill. I mean, what's interesting? The Seattle PI, which is the Seattle Times and the Seattle PI are the two big papers in Seattle, and now the PI has just gone online. But I think it was just a couple days ago, they had a big feature story, top 20 places in Seattle to meet somebody and get married. They listed Mars Hill Church. And the article said, it seems like if anybody's getting married, they met at Mars Hill. So that's like what we're known for. And I'm like, that's cool, come on in,
We're not against that.
Yeah, so we have that's part of it too, a very full premarital process that's theologically robust and complementarian. And the pastors aren't going to just go ahead and marry you. You got to qualify, and then once you are married, there's a year-long mentoring relationship with an older couple. So, for us, it's a very sacred and serious thing. So we have hundreds of weddings a year, hundreds.
My father, Jim Wilson, likes to say that if you're single, male, and 27, find out her name and ask her. That's his approach. Do you have a date? Do you have a deadline for the young man?
Yeah. See, women are like wine. They get finer with age. Men are like milk.
That is so true. Related to this, courtship and marriage, with this, we're all of us in this life on a conveyor belt. Mm-hmm. We're headed toward meeting God at some point. If God gives us the 70, then we're just going through these phases. Your ministry is focused on reaching these young men, but once you've got them and they marry, mm-hmm. and they start having families, all of them are on a conveyor belt. They're having kids, and then there's Little League, and then do we start a Christian school, and what do we do now?
We're there, yeah.
Okay, you're in the middle of that?
2,000 kids on a Sunday, under the age of 10, most of them under the age of 6.
Okay, now that means there is a day is coming when all those kids are going to be 15.
Yeah, I see the tsunami on the horizon, because they keep having kids.
Right.
They'll be fruitful, multiply. Mars Hill went dibs, like we called that verse.
Okay, so now what happens is if you get young men in their 20s to marry a girl and start having kids, and everything you're saying tonight, take responsibility. Authority flows to those who take responsibility. Mm-hmm. So a certain measure of it is going to flow to a guy who's 27, newly married. But that same guy, when he's 37 or when he's 47, if he's been laying down his life for his family, he's going to be in his 40s hitting his stride.
Yeah.
He's going to be coming online. right? His wife has glorified him in a lot of ways, and so you've got a whole bunch of those people.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to be starting businesses. They're going to be
They
starting,
are.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the tsunami that.
Yeah, they're starting companies, they're starting churches, they're highly entrepreneurial, very aggressive, and they network together. And I tell them, man, hey, the Fool's Parade is drunk in the blocks, so just, get out ahead of them. I mean, if you can be young and take responsibility and get out ahead, I mean, you've got a good head start on the Fool's Parade. And if there's some good godly brothers you can network with for your business or ministry or church plan or whatever it is, and you guys work together, it's pretty dynamic. So we have increasingly highly educated guys, successful businessmen, guys that are starting to bring in significant money, people that are high up in the media. I mean, just culture makers, not just culture consumers.
Do you find that most of your people stay in the Seattle area?
Well, right now we have churches in Seattle, and then we have Portland we're opening, Orange County we're opening, and also Albuquerque, which is about 2 years old and has exploded on us, so we're moving them into a new building. And what happens is, as soon as we launch a new location, we really run it off of community groups. So we primarily meet on Sunday, and then we do groups in homes where a godly family, ideally, will open up their home for meal, community, Bible study, reach the neighbors, discipleship, friendship. And then what happens is tons of newly married couples, new Christians, non-Christians, singles and college students, they pour into the home because they come from a broken home and they've never seen a family that was intact. Mm-hmm. And so there's a real desire for that. And as soon as we do that, then all the groups grow and then they multiply, and then we get so many people that we have to start another church. I mean, so for us, these people are very entrepreneurial, and they just keep, like the church is multiplying in weddings, it's multiplying in births, it's multiplying in dollars, it's multiplying in real estate, it's multiplying in groups, it's multiplying in locations, it's multiplying in states. I mean, I'm just trying to, I feel like a kite in a hurricane, I'm trying to keep up with it.
You've got a grizzly bear by the ears.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you start a church campus in another city, another state, that's with locals. It's not like you take a bunch of people from Seattle and move. So the people in the Seattle area are largely staying in the Seattle area.
Yeah, in the greater Seattle area. And sometimes there's first, second, and third city. So a first city is a city that you go to for your college degree and to start your to start your career, like in Manhattan. But a second or third city is where you move to raise your family. Because like raising a family in Manhattan or even in downtown Seattle, there's roughly 150,000 dogs and 136,000 children. So there's more dogs than children in Seattle and in San Francisco. And so the city's just not built for kids. There's doggy parks, not kid parks. There's doggy daycares, not kid daycares. I mean, it's bizarre.
And from what you were saying earlier, a significant percentage of those children are Mars Hill kids.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, we're working on it. Yeah, but then as people move, we'll start churches where they're moving to, because too, the men who can't afford to live in the city, many intentionally do live in the city, and they want to do the Jeremiah 29, 4-9, serve the city, seek the peace, prosperity, well-being of the city. That's in their heart. Other guys just can't afford it because they're thinking, if I'm going to downsize to one income and we're going to have kids and mom's not going to be in the workforce, which is all what we teach and it's highly controversial, then it's like, well, but if I'm going to live in the city and it's only condos and the school system's horrible and it's really expensive, I got to relocate my family because our primary commitment is we want to have children and mom wants to be mom.
Okay. When you're with your campuses, are they have, each one has their own elder board and they have their own pastor and that
they
sort
function in your language. It'd be a presbytery where there's a lead pastor at each location. There's a team of elders and deacons. Everything is there, church discipline, community accountability, premarital process, biblical counseling. Everything is there except for me, and I'm preaching via video, and about a quarter of the time I'm not there, and so the local elders will preach live. And so ultimately, it's a very slow church planting strategy, but the day will come when I'm done. I'm 40 now, the day will come. And the intention is that all of these churches, most likely, will become
ready to go.
Autonomous churches in the Acts 29 network. And so that's how it's working right now. And here's what's weird, though, too. I mean, I wasn't sure the video would work, but what I'm finding is the people who serve the most, give the most, and are in the highest percentage of small group community participation or where there's video, because all the people who want to reach that neighborhood go there and they own it, and the people who don't give or serve as much come to see me. And so it's like, I think if I never preached, we would be awesome. If I stayed home and just talked to a camera and just, it seems like if I show up, things get worse. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, yeah. So I said to the ministers this morning, wherever you go, there you are. So anything to add before I've got another line of questions I wanted to pursue. Is anything on masculinity, marriage, life changes that you wanted to say?
I think, just the last thing would be that everybody knows what's wrong with young men. Nobody knows what to do about it. And this is where the church has a magnificent opportunity through the gospel and the teaching of the Bible to meet a massive cultural need that even the feminists agree with. Like, young men are irresponsible, they're not marriage worthy, they're not in college, they're not working, they're filling up jails, they're impregnating women, they're boys. Okay, what are you going to do? We don't know.
Or just more of what we've been doing, which got us here.
Yeah, which is great. And so there is this really significant opportunity for the church to meet a cultural need with a fatherless and aimless generation.
You said earlier in the talk that guys are like a thermos. You can drop them and kick them around. Have you responded that when you give straight talk to the guys?
We don't put those online.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do the guys respond well to it?
Yeah. Some bow up and they want to fight, and that means someday they'll be an elder because they got a little courage in them. We just got to work on them. But the guys do respond really well. As long as you appeal to their dignity and you don't take their dignity.
Right.
You're like, you are an image bearer of God. I expect more.
We want you to stand up straight.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can do this by the grace of God with the men of God. And we're here to pick your sorry self up and to help you walk straight. But guys respond well to that. And that was hard for me to learn because early on I just preached like that to everybody, and the women didn't respond the same way as the men.
Trial and error.
Yeah, like, whoops.
I was in the Navy.
Did you know boys and girls are different?
I found
They're different.
As it turns out. I was in the Navy, went through boot camp. I've talked to a bunch of guys in the military. I don't think I've ever met a guy who wasn't proud of and pleased to talk about his time in boot camp. And the tougher it was, the better it is to talk about. And this was people right in your face yelling about your ancestry. And it's really tough, but guys eat it up. It's a mark of masculinity to be able to take a certain kind of discipline. Mm-hmm. So you can offer it, if you offer it in a way that doesn't cut them down in the wrong way, doesn't emasculate them, disciplining them and treating them with a less than perfect tenderness is just exactly what they need.
Well, and I was reading a sociological book. I drift in kind of different disciplines, but there was a book called Fun, Inc., and it's the history of video games. And he makes this interesting argument, non-Christian guy as far as I could tell. Young men play video games because, number one, they want to be on a team, a unit. They want to go on a sacred quest to defeat a foe and to liberate a people, especially women. Mm-hmm. And so they join World of Warcraft,
right.
Which is not really a quest to rescue a person. It's a really sad false gospel. It's like, if you want to fight a dragon, you want to be part of a team, if you want to make a conquest for the sake of a great kingdom, we got a better option.
Right. So basically what a lot of the video games are is organized daydreams. So,
Yeah.
boys love to daydream.
Yeah. It's war without any of the trouble, and you can just eat foods that end in Eatos. Cheetos, Fritos, Doritos. Just sit there and Eatos away, you know? Yeah.
Well, I think we've exhausted that.